and good evening. It's a Lockdown Live special. It's Skeetnet on a Tuesday night. It's the 23rd of March, and this evening, joined by the three amigos, or you with the three amigos, it's Michael Josem from Douglas. Hello, Michael.
Good evening, Jed. Good to be here with you.
And Derek, live from innermost Lancashire.
Yes, greetings from Middle-earth.
Well, now, at the outset, Jed, I heard on another one of your shows the other day, there was some discussion, or some different people were saying your name differently. Some people sort of like the GIF versus GIF debate, Ged versus Jed debate. How do we pronounce your name?
Well, it is Jed, but I think on that particular broadcast there may have been some liquid involved by one of the guests. I don't know, but it's been a good week in the old media. I mean, especially today, anyone that's keeping an eye on the Manx Radio webpage and other agencies will see we've got a feast of news to talk about. But before we kind of get into the detail, what's really made me laugh this week is the DOI are going to have a big report written about them. I think it's on the style of a Beeman's report. I don't know whether you've clocked that one, Michael. It's going to be an absolute feast, isn't it, this? What's going to be the outcome?
Well, we'll see. But one of the things that I thought was remarkable was that Jason Morehouse posted about this on Facebook, on his Facebook account. And one of the things he revealed was that in the letter from the Chief Minister to Jason Morehouse was allegedly a comment from the Chief Minister saying that they only wanted comments from people who have had to interact with the Department of Infrastructure in some manner. And it is, I just don't get it.
We all had to interact with the Department of Infrastructure. You have to drive on their chuffing roads for a start. So
I did see that Facebook post from Jason Morehouse, and fair play to him. But he's been open, with his media. Although, did you hear today? He left the mic on, and a rude word just slipped out. It just shows the guy's human, and it brought a bit of mirth into the proceedings today. It was on the vote, and it was actually on the vote where, again, the block vote stops the questions going further in the House of Keys. So these other questions, this is what the constituents are asking their MHKs to do, to ask, to probe, to scrutinise in the chamber, and they're getting bumped on to the following week because of this block vote. I mean, it doesn't say much about communication, does it, in government? Michael?
Yeah, you're right. It's and especially in a situation where we're acting remotely, where things might be a little bit slower than they might be in person, it makes sense to have a little bit of extra time. It's not as if these MHKs have to commute to and from work. They've got extra time, so a few extra minutes to make up for the time lost for the various technical issues and so on would be fair and reasonable. But what are you going to do?
Well, we can circumvent the report. I've actually got the results here. I scribbled them down just before we came on air. And what will happen is they'll say that the DOI is actually too big. Okay, we've got it's too big. It's too big to run a bus service that's kind of out of control. In fact, the wheels have come off. We'll be talking about that later. And the joyriding escapade and those poor bus drivers are now all off sick. But also, how can one department run steam trains, tourism service, electric trams, the actual local authority business, and all the buildings that we've got to look after? It's just going to say it's too big. We've got to split it up and put more personnel in there to make sure that the civil service aren't under such stress. Derek, you're nodding your head in full agreement, I take it.
I mean, it's a parochial church council in terms of UK scale. The things that they're faced with aren't difficult. They aren't complex. They aren't in such huge numbers that it makes it, requiring half a flipping wing of Whitehall to run it. It's just badly organised, that's all. And nobody's got a grip of it. And there seems to be a malaise with regard to the way that it's structured. It's all doable, and there's some good people in there. I mean, there's one or two who are just a bloody nuisance, to be honest with you, and really questions need to be asked about their competency. But the majority of people that work for the DOI, especially at the the shop floor, at the public interface sites, are bloody good people.
Yep.
It just needs a little bit more organisation, and quite often, and we see this quite often within government, both in the island and in the UK. The people that are doing the job at the coalface know what the problems are and know how to sort them. If only they were listened to. But of course, that's not sexy, is it? We'd rather get a consultant in at 100 or so grand to tell us how to fix things. Nobody knows how to fix a business better than the business owner. And sometimes they just need an effective coach to actually work them through it, either in a team basis or as an individual with the individual executives. And then they need to commit to making that more efficient. It sounds a bit utopian, but it's not rocket science. If this was a private sector business, they'd have to adapt. Otherwise, they'd just be going down the tubes with mass redundancies. But because the public keeps shoveling money into it, and there's this never-ending cascade of cash coming in, it doesn't seem to matter. I always said the most important rule you can set yourself as a public servant is spend the money as if it was your own household budget, because that really does focus the mind. It stops spaff. It means that the important things get spent on. There's a bit of thrift involved, but until people get into that mindset, I don't see a lot of opportunity for change. I'll be interested to see what happens with it, but I'm not hopeful there's going to be any major revelations or tomorrow we change.
You're right. I mean, going down the tubes is too clinical. We don't do tubes very well here, especially in the swimming centre. It's more likely to be a dirty, great pothole, isn't it, Michael?
Yeah, right. And I partly agree with Derek, and I partly disagree with Derek, in that he's right that the only way to have it operating efficiently is for some sort of skin in the game from the operators. But that's not going to be viable in a government department. And to turn the Manx Department for Infrastructure into a lean enterprise charged solely with building stuff would be a little bit like putting Napoleon in charge of your local McDonald's restaurant. By the end of the month, he'd be running the local mall. By the end of the year, he'd be running some sort of small European nation. It's just the nature of the beast. And so I admire the optimism that we could somehow reform this department for infrastructure, but realistically, I think it's very unlikely. It's just part of what it is to have a government-run enterprise that just doesn't have the same measures of accountability and the same opportunities to sack underperforming staff or to reward overperforming staff. It goes both ways.
It's an interesting thing you talk about there about that sort of individual accountability, because Mike, you remember Mike Culverhouse actually started to reform the way the budget was used in the Isle Police, and they actually looked to make individual inspectors accountable for their particular pot of cash. Now, statutorily, he couldn't do it, but he made a very, very good point, and it did actually start to focus people's minds in terms of how important it was to spend the budget right. And the Isle of Man Constabulary for years has either underspent or come in on budget. It's very, very rarely there's an overspend, because there is a degree of thrift. There is an eye on the public purse, and that's one of the the good things about it. So it can be done. I mean, the other alternative is, what do? Do you just sort of do the whole Windscale Sellafield thing, have a big fire, and then just rename it and hope that the public don't notice? I'm really not sure exactly what is going to happen, other than what Jed says in terms of, well, we'll break it down, we'll put another chief executive in charge of another smaller department, and we just end up, we just end up spending more money on something which fundamentally people running it, or if it's not that, if the right people are running it, and I do have a lot of time for some of the top people in there. Is it something else that's holding them back? Is it the way that the chief secretary just dictates policy has to be delivered or whatever? I don't know. We never know these answers, will we?
Well, it's bonkers, and it's bonkers to have people involved in steam trains selling tourism separately to the actual main visit agency and so forth. Anyway, we could go. We've got some contributions coming in, so I'll just pluck them off the the board here. So we've got James, and he says the CM has restricted people engaging with Beamans unless they have had experience with the DOI. That is disgusting, he says. And he goes on, put the local authority housing back under DHSC where it was. Also get rid of Minister Baker. There is more democracy in Kim Jong-un than Baker. So that's a quite stark comment.
Yeah, I think James is spot on there in that Minister Baker mistakens and misunderstands his role, in that he thinks his role there is to be the representative of the government to the people, when it really should be representing the people to the government. It's just a fundamental misunderstanding of the role, and that's why Minister Baker is so out of his depth and so continually making bad decision after bad decision, because he just doesn't know what he's supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a couple more comments just flying in. Christian Cowley, who's a contributor, saying, then use your credit card. So I'm not quite sure. So, Christian, if you could just come back and elaborate on that one. And Uncle Rich, 2020, more BAC monos needed. Is that code? What does that mean? Well, if you come back, Rich, on that. Oh, what's that? Oh, yes, I've got you.
That's a bit...
Right.
That's a BAC mono.
Yeah. Move it a little bit to the left, Derek. We just missed that across it. Yes, right. So this is like a really snazzy one-seat car for cops. I seem to remember now the story. Very quickly, Derek, just fill us in on that. 20 seconds. What happened?
Well, on the back of that meeting, that was Rory Reid, ex-Top Gear, who brought it over for an article to be written, and the managing director of BAC, I got quite friendly with him, and for 2017 they liveried as a car, one of the best PR pieces we've ever done, I think, to be honest with you. We had a cracking fleet. It was the year I retired, funnily enough. We had a cracking fleet. We had that. We had an RS Focus and a Ford Mustang, which Ford specially registered for us. Great engagement tools, great PR. And Mono did really well out of it as well, which was really encouraging. So yeah, that was the story behind the fabled BAC Mono. I think it's still knocking about, the police liveried one as well. It was some weapon.
Oh, Christian's just come back and he's saying, yeah, Isle of Man government spending money, the cash rolling in. So I'll see where that's going now. Just on the topic of spending money, I was astonished today. I was listening to Question Time, which was restricted. And it was Robert Shaw, Mr. Robert Shaw. He put Mr. Baker on the spot. And this was about the extra charges involved in the trams, just going that little bit further, I think, either from Broadway or from the Sefton down to the sea terminal. And apparently when this was voted through in the budget in 2017, all the costs were catered for. And Mr. Baker, he was put on the spot and he was unable to account really whether this money had been sucked into something else, and hence there's going to be a future bid for this work to take place, later on. There's going to be another vote on it in Tynwald. So Robert Shaw was saying, well, hang on, we've already voted on this, the expenditure has been granted. But it kind of put things into perspective that it's a real hash of decision making. Nobody knew what was going on, and at the end of the day, we're actually spaffing a load of money on a heritage vehicle that doesn't quite fit in really with a lot of people's thoughts. I mean, I know Bill Shimmons, he was really spiking the argument, talking about the damage that's been caused to the businesses and so forth. So it's worth keeping an eye on that one. Very quickly, I'll go to Michael on this one. Trams, what's your view?
Look, I can understand the rationale from some people who want to get rid of the thing. I can also understand the rationale for people who want the trams to run the full length of the promenade. But I cannot understand the rationale of this government that's going to run the trams halfway, stop construction, and then dig up the prom again to extend the tramway the rest of the length of the prom. That makes no sense to me. And like either we're doing the trams or we're not. We can't do this. Let's do half the trams and then dig up the prom yet again at a later stage. That makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Derek, I've got an idea where you're coming from, but quick fire, go on.
Yeah, I mean, my views are well documented. Douglasborough Council played a blinder. They offloaded £600,000 a year of expenditure. They did the right thing. They called it the end of the line. Government, with no real cognizance, no real rationale dug in and saved them. And then the really worrying thing is they went headlong into building an intrinsically unsafe transport system, i.e. trams running down the middle of the road with no centre refuge or anything for pedestrians to get on and off, and thought that was okay. God forbid anybody ever gets seriously injured from here on in, because that was the option, to rip up something which was fine in 1890, but certainly not right in 2021. And they say, oh, we took advice on it. Well, bad advice is no defence in health and safety law. So let's just hope that nobody gets badly injured on it. But it is an intrinsically unsafe system. It had its day. It could have been sent somewhere else if we wanted to preserve it. If they built something like an Eden project on the old Sutherland site or something like that, and there was some purpose of trotting up the prom for something to go to and spend half a day there and then trot back, I get that. But it really is a railway to nowhere. It serves no purpose. And is it actually fundamentally inhumane to have horses trotting up and down a prom in amongst traffic? Probably is, I think.
Well, it is one of the busiest routes on the island. There's no question about that. I'm not sure whether the horses actually want to be there, but we have got a case to preserve our heritage, and the holy grail of the steam and the electric and the horse does have a place somewhere on the Isle of Man, because people, do enjoy coming to the island and experiencing that. And when it's gone, it's gone. But I often wonder whether the horse trams were really one enthusiast's folly. Okay, and this is someone who is very powerful, and his influence still continues in ways you wouldn't believe. And I often think, was the whole £20 million design of this flaming promenade around 2 horse tram tracks? Was that the key feature?
Yeah.
And we're left with this lunatic legacy where, and like you say, they're struggling now to put cyclists on the prom because there's a hoo-ha about that. Anyway, we'll just put that to one side. We'll move back on the buses though. Michael, it's the biggest infection spreader on the island now, isn't it? Is that what I'm hearing? And it's all your fault. It's all your fault. The Manx public are getting the blame.
The Chief Minister raised the idea of people joyriding as passengers on Manx buses during the pandemic, which I don't want to say no one has ever taken a joyride on the Manx on a bus during the pandemic, but I find it difficult to believe that there is a meaningful group of people who are doing this, and B, that these people are somehow infected themselves and then C, transmitting viruses somehow, the disease somehow, to other passengers. That seems to me like a literally fantastic concept. I can't comprehend for the life of me how that could be the case, especially when what seems to be happening is that there is now 40 of the 100 bus, van and drivers are now in some form of isolation or self-isolation or quarantine, which to me suggests it's not the passengers who are transmitting the virus, but rather a number of bus drivers have got it either from each other, from their families, possibly from passengers. And so it all seems a bit curious to me. And the idea that it's caused by joyriding on the bus, van and buses is...
That can't be true. If riding around on a bus on the Isle of Man during lockdown is the best thing you've got to do, then it really is end of days, isn't it?
Well, Derek, I mean...
Well, if it's truly happening, then what should be happening is the Chief Minister and they should be investigating and taking action. Because what seems to be the case here is that they're fumbling for excuses, they're fumbling for explanations, they're fumbling to blame anyone other than themselves. And so if it's true, the Chief Minister has an obligation to report it to the police and have the proper authorities investigate.
So I can just imagine a constant walk up and down the aisle of the bus and papers. What do you do? I mean, God Almighty! It just beggars belief. It really does. It's
well, the press conferences, they've delivered the mantra that they've always acted upon the data and the information. So where has this come from? Because it is totally absent. So I think they've dropped one there, because there's no doubt about it, when you look at the social media round and about, it's certainly changed its tone. And I'll just put something up on the screen here. And this was a series of tweets by Isle of Man government. And it was talking about the spread caused by people going to work with symptoms, and the volume of traffic still on our roads suggests that too many people are still coming into workplaces. And again, you know, some of the contributors there, someone on Twitter says, well, change the rules then, instead of writing them on here, you melons. You know, that's the kind of tone that this has got at the moment. So for me, is the current credibility like hanging by a thread, Michael? I mean, we'll move on to FOI and, you know, some disclosures there. Short. In fact, we can move on to that now if you want to.
Sure. So first of all, just on that last issue there, the situation just seems to me that there are a lot of people with various hypotheses and allegations and so on. And if there are people who are breaking the rules, then they should be investigated by the police and appropriate action taken against them as individuals. The idea that you blame the whole 85,000 people of the Isle of Man because a handful of people broken the rules, that's just not our system of government. That's not the British, that's not the Manx way. That's not our inheritance. And so if the Chief Minister or if the government thinks people are breaking the rules, then they have the investigative power to investigate them. It's not, you know, and so it's difficult for me to answer the question, are people, you know, breaking rules by going into offices? Because, you know, Michael Josem obviously isn't. I haven't left my apartment building at all in the last 24 hours. And so in that sense, you know, I'm not a police officer. I have no investigative power. You know, I don't even have a balcony in my apartment, so I can't even sit outside legally. So, you know, that's the situation we're at now.
Derek, you might have noticed that the police have been in action, and I think they've delivered, is it 80 warnings or 80 cautions? Now,
yeah,
is that confusing? Because would those of those 80, how many would have gone through the judicial process last year? Okay, has there been a change in policy? So how many would have gone to prison last year and not now? What's your view? Is there anything happening there?
Well, there's no context, is there? Like you say, unless you actually release, well, this is what happened in lockdown version 1, in terms of the number of people we actually spoke to, the number of calls we went to, and then the attrition rate in terms of the number of people that ended up at Derby. It's irrelevant data. I think it's indicative that they are showing that they are doing their bit in all this, and they are actually engaging with people and trying to do something. But I mean, if Big Howard is saying that, well, everybody's going into the office, so what do you expect? Then there's something fundamentally wrong with his cabinet's approach to how they are curtailing this virus. I mean, numbers are going down, so maybe it's all a good news story. But I mean, hospitalisations are still significantly high. There's 3 in ITU, I noticed as well, which good prayers with those people. But it's all a little bit schoolboy football at the moment. It reminds me of the early days when, you know, he wasn't able to send it packing after 12 weeks, as he promised us many moons ago. Well, about 12 months ago, almost to the day. It seems a little bit like that. It seems like we've learned nothing from anywhere else, either by our own collective experience on the island or the collective experience of the British Isles and further beyond. And it just seems that we're hoping for things to bear out. But, you know, in a couple of weeks' time, things are starting to open up over here. We're seeing the spike which I expected when the schools went back, which is very interesting compared to the Isle of Man experience. I've got a real fear that we're actually going to have more freedoms at some point over here in the United Kingdom than you guys are on the island, and that is really.
You do now.
Well, I suppose we do, yeah. You know, I mean, I'm not really feeling any grave restrictions on my life at all, really, other than I can't go to the pub. I can live with that, you know. where everybody's managing and getting round things and doing okay. So that's going to be a really worrying thing. And once again, I'd sort of state my position. If I was looking at it, thinking, yeah, you know what, let's just align with the British Isles here and get in the groove with England and manage our way out of this with everybody else. Because if you're going to go down the route again of elimination, which I've got a funny feeling is the underlying desire of cabinet to say, hey, we did it again, guys. You're going to be back on Alcatraz. There's going to be no movement in that. It's going to get stricter and stricter and stricter to literally, I think it's going to be drone ships bringing in the cargo and food for you because, we can't risk any human contact with the outside world. And that's a miserable, insular, inbred existence if there ever was one.
Michael, talk to me about the vaccines. You've picked up on a few bits and pieces there, haven't you?
Sure. So just to pick up there on something that Derek said is this idea of elimination. And one of the weird things that is now happening is that there's a significant chunk of people of the Isle of Man who have not one but two doses of the vaccine some time ago now. And they are substantially protected, not just from the risk of death, but they're also substantially protected from even any symptoms of the disease arising, which is good for them. Yet there's a number of people, basically in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, who have not yet had their first dose, and so hopefully those people will get their dose in the next few weeks. And so there's a weirdness in that. Let us say we eradicate the disease again and come out of lockdown, say sometime in mid-April. Well, we're only going to have eradicated the disease for about 6 weeks or so before we begin to wind down the protection anyway. And that makes sense from a global macro view. But for any individual, the best time to isolate is immediately before you get the vaccine, because and for the week or two after you get the vaccine, because look, it's only 4 or 5 weeks to go now, and so in which case you've endured a year of the pandemic without getting the virus, as I suspect I have. So why not hide for another 4, 5, 6 weeks so you eliminate the chance entirely by the use of the vaccine. And so therefore we have this odd situation whereby the community-wide enforcement of isolation, the rationale becomes weaker, but the individual rationale to avoid getting the disease or getting the virus becomes stronger. And so that's a weird situation for a public policy point of view that requires some considerate thinking. I don't think there's an obvious answer there. Now, to come along to your question there, Jed, about the freedom of information, about the rollout of the vaccines. One of the things that we saw last week from the health minister, and let me get the exact wording up here because I want to quote from the health minister's comments exactly. He says that we have a buffer. He says we have this buffer of vaccines, so we have this buffer to ensure that we do not run out of stock. The health minister said last Wednesday. And then he went on later, as part of the same interview, one of the reasons we keep that buffer in stock, so that although sometimes stock might run low, we don't actually run out and have to pause the vaccination rollout. And I thought that at the time last Wednesday was just the health minister misspeaking. But now what we saw today in Tynwald is, according to a report from Jeff the Mongoose, the Chief Minister has doubled down on this dangerous and dumb thinking. And the Jeff the Mongoose today reported the Chief Minister saying, we have dropped our vaccine reserve stock, but we do need to keep some as we've been warned about supplies. And that is dangerous, dumb thinking. A vaccine provides no use and no protection whatsoever unless you use it. The only way to get protected by a vaccine is if you put it into a human body. It doesn't do you any good to leave it in storage. It doesn't do you any good so you can look at it in the freezer. It's a lot like a seatbelt. Having a seatbelt in a car doesn't actually protect you unless you use it. It's not the vaccine that protects people, it's the vaccination. And the Chief Minister's dangerous and dumb comments about trying to keep some sort of buffer, keep some sort of stock, are very similar to what the Chief Minister of Wales, the First Minister of Wales, Mark Dreyford, said in mid-January, which made him literally the laughing stock of the world when he made similarly dumb comments. And that thinking is just bonkers. because it misunderstands. It fundamentally misunderstands what a vaccine is and how it works.
I just don't get it at all. It's a bit like back in the days. I remember in Blackpool when I first started policing there. We had you have an armed response vehicle now, an ARV. We had a UAV, which wasn't an unmanned aerial vehicle. It was an unarmed response vehicle, where the guns were kept in the armoury at the local headquarters. And if it was an armed incident, they had to go back to get them and then go out and actually deal with the armed suspect. When you run out, you run out. If you run out, you run out. But you've been doing the right thing by shooting people up with the dose. It's no good sat in the cupboard. It's like having, a Stinger tyre deflation system and leaving it in the cupboard in the office. It needs to be in the back of the car, ready for immediate deployment, or put out on a permanent basis or whatever if you really want to annoy the public. But where's that being driven? Someone somewhere has written a decision saying we're going to keep some in the cupboard just in case. Well, just in case of what? Because I'm not the brightest button in the box, but I just don't get that one at all.
I wouldn't know. I know there's a bit of discord around Europe, isn't there, about the supply of the vaccine and all this cross-border hoo-ha. Could mean that there's going to be a limited supply, I think, of AstraZeneca and so forth. Look, I'm just going to jump in on the comments again and have a quick run through. Thank you so much for your contributions this evening. Keep them coming. Any questions for any of us, fire them in. I'll just run through. Christian Cowley, he's going back to the buses, so I take it there is CCTV to support this, or was it assumed to be unprovable? So yeah, that's true. I mean, the buses do have cameras and every other extra you could ever imagine on. James said, yeah, it's
and also just on that, Jed, every person who rides a bus now has an electronic record because they've all been scanned.
Yeah, that's you've got a point.
Track them
there.
down by their credit cards. Let's have these people in jail.
Yeah,
joyriding.
I that never occurred to me, but not everyone has a contactless card, do they? And who knows whether that? Hopefully, some sympathy.
You can only ride the bus now with the contactless service. Either you have your Go Vannon card or your contactless card. So you've got to have one or the other.
Yeah. Interesting, James.
Maybe there's fair evaders who are joyriders.
They know who you are. They're coming for you. You're joyriding.
With satellite tracking as well.
Virus spreading issue.
It's big brother, Derek. Right, James says 3 words. Fred Carno's government, and then Bonzo's in. He says Fred Carno's could do a damn sight better job. Right, there's a few more. So, right, there's a good one here. I like this one. This is from Uncle Rich. And today, he travelled 150 miles around the island. Home deliveries for a Manx company. Many homes isolating or have COVID. Yet I won't get a COVID jab till later into 2021. And he says that's madness, but that just shows that he's going to be exposed. He's going to have to be very careful, isn't he, handing over the packages and engaging. Derek?
I don't know. I mean, we have our food delivered every week by Morrison's, or the supermarkets are available, and we have. I've had trades in and out. The plumber was in today fixing a fault. We go to the corner shop. We're in and out of there. We pass people in the streets when we're out for walks. I don't honestly think. I mean, I get an Amazon delivery every day. I've got a lovely new plane today for doing a beautiful work of art. I'll show it you later. But the thing is, we're getting stuff all the time. And you know what? A year in, I've not caught COVID by getting an Amazon delivery. I think there's a point. I mean, I take his point. I mean, he's a key worker as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And fair play, mate. That is above and beyond doing that, and it's great to see that companies are adjusting. But threat and risk, this whole thing in terms of that open air concept, I still see as very, very low risk, and I think most public health officials would see that as very, very low risk. It's more, I mean, obviously he's dropping off. I think it's more likely to be, the more prolonged stuff, which is likely to cause an issue.
Indeed. Now, Michael, you had some other material on your website, michaeljoseph.com. And this related to, was it some freedom of information submissions? I don't think we quite covered that earlier. I just wanted to get to the nuts and bolts in that even when somebody goes through the laborious and difficult process of asking for a freedom of information disclosure, they still don't get the truth. What happened?
So this is someone else's freedom of information request. I don't know who. It's anonymised when it was published. But one of the annoyances of the Isle of Man government freedom of information system, their casework system that they use online, is it's very difficult to link and to share content that you see there with someone else. So if Michael Josem submits a freedom of information request, there's a response online. It's very difficult for me to then share a link with another person because of some boring technical details. And so I saw some people who I follow on social media sharing various extracts of a freedom of information request. And so I wanted to read the whole context. And so what it appears to be is that the government, and I want to say appears to be because these are the underlying documents that have been published. They are provided without commentary, without context. And so you're left there reading the document to try and understand what has been said by who. And so this appears to be an email from the Director of Public Health, Dr. Henrietta Hewitt, providing advice to the steam packet in August 2020. And so she asks, or she is asked rather, about the current domestic policy of social distancing and so on. And there's bits in there where it appears that Dr. Hewitt has advised the steam packet in August last year, anybody who has spent time off island or interacted with people from elsewhere has to be regarded as potentially infected. People in these circumstances should self-isolate when they are on island to reduce any interactions between themselves and others who have not left the island / mixed with UK / EU residents. That means that if IOM crew has to work alongside UK / EU crew, they should be using all appropriate mitigations, including social distancing and face coverings, as well as hygiene measures. And then goes on to say that people on the Isle of Man, the Isle of Man crew, if they do mix with are working on the same vessel as UK / EU crew, that when they are then back on the Isle of Man, they should be self-isolating if they are close contracts of UK / EU crew, i.e. spending more than 15 minutes directly face to face at less than 2 minutes and so on. And so that's one document. And then the government has also released the directions notice that was provided by the government. Now again, these are just the underlying documents that are provided without any context. And so they're now available on the website, michaeljosem.com. Scroll down to the very bottom there. There's a section called reference where you can see sort of reference documents that I provide, without any commentary of my own. So you can have a look at that at a few different cases where you can see the underlying documents, and we can, as we wait the future outcome of the investigation.
So in essence, that disclosure didn't actually say that every steam packet worker who's based on the Isle of Man doesn't have to isolate unless they've come into close contact whilst on the vessel. Did you read that as it, Derek?
Yeah, I mean, how sort of drilled down do you get with these things? I think that ultimately it needed somebody to have a look at it forensically and say, has any laws been breached here? Because it's obviously all out there now, isn't it? But it's just sat there in the ether. We've had this directive from the head of prosecutions, who actually seems to be the chief secretary now, as opposed to the attorney general. So that's deemed everything a nolle prosequi, that nobody will be held to account for it. So justice and also, as Michael says, the FOI stuff, it's clunky. Just be open and show this was asked, that was what the result was, rather than trying to. Is it deliberate or is it just incompetence? Or are they just trying to create a fog so that people can't find the information that they need. It's not transparent government. And again, because the island's a small jurisdiction, it could be the best in the world at this, but chooses not to be.
Well, we've got some more contributions. I'm just going to put them up onto the screen. Tony Quayle has joined in, and he's asking, how much stock have we got? Is it 15,000 vaccines, I think?
Yeah, the latest update is there's 15. The latest update is, yes, there's just over 15,000 in stock, in storage on the Isle of Man. So that it might be slightly less now because some will have been used today, but as of the latest update, which was on the 21st of March, which was, I guess, on Monday then, they had just over 15,000. Some of them will have subsequently used. So, yeah, we've got about 15,000.
And there's one for, I think you'll appreciate this one, Derek. So it's about the vaccines, really. I keep getting told off by my kids for saving my single malts. They say no good to me when I'm dead. Drink them now and enjoy them now.
Correct.
So I like that. And then we've got.
I've got a few bottles I can't afford to drink, to be honest with you. They are collateral in the case Mrs. Flint ever kicks me out. But yeah, in general, I do agree with that. And maybe whiskey is ultimately the water of life. Maybe that's what we should actually all be doing, just glugging down a bit of Glenmorangie or something like that, and eventually, of course, Manx single malt, which will be in production fairly soon as well. So something to look forward to.
Lovely, thank you, Charles, for that. One from Bonzo. By the way, is Michael broadcasting from a minister's office? So,
the presidential suite.
He's bigger than that. He is bigger than that. We've got Barry. Let's see what's happening. Barry, okay.
You've been up the scaffold. You've been up the scaffolding outside the government offices, haven't you? You're actually sat in the chief minister's office, aren't you? I'll tell you a very quick anecdote about that. The former chief constable of North Wales, I forget his name now, an ecstatically interesting character, very, very eccentric. There was some scaffolding outside the outside of North Wales police headquarters. He said, "That's a security risk." No, boss, don't worry. We've got it. Don't worry. That's a security risk. And then one night, he actually came to police headquarters, climbed up the scaffolding and broke into the building, and then rang the person that said it wasn't a problem from that person's office and said, "Listen, I've just broken in without going through the front door. Yeah. It's a security risk."
Talking of going to ministerial offices and so on, I do appreciate, going back to that conversation from a few minutes ago, of how the Chief Minister turns up to this facility where he meets with various other ministers for their weekly and twice a week broadcast, while telling everyone else to stay at home, as if he couldn't do that perfectly well from home. So the people in glass houses shouldn't throw thrones, buddy.
Well, he got tongue-tied this week. He's referring to a jab, and he called it a jag. And I think he is an owner. I think is that right, Derek? But anyway, there's some more stuff on screen. We've got Barry Murphy. Is it wrong of me at this stage? I've lost all interest in COVID, briefings, vaccinations, lockdowns. Haven't we all? I think we're all getting very tired and a bit tetchy. Now, Uncle Rich has come back. Thank you. I did ask the question on the screen. How many parcels are you dropping a day? And he says the parcel lads are doing 120 plus. So they all need a pat on the back, mighty people. So let's do the metrics on that. There's 100 vans all dishing out all these parcels. There's no wonder that the retail landscape is changing. And he says it's been lazy spas, garden furniture and treadmills lately. God, imagine delivering a treadmill. That'd be a right headache. Bring back Glenn Keller. Right, okay, here we go. Here's a good one. Right, this is
what?
One of... Apparently, it's useful for paint stripping. No, that's wrong. I actually had a drink of it. I quite enjoyed it. So...
your palate needs some serious attention. Get in touch with Ralphie on Ralphie.com. He'll give you a tasting masterclass up there at in his bothy at Mackle.
I drink anything, I tell you. Right, so we've got Bonzo, and he's coming back on the FOI. It's fundamentally misunderstood. It's about the freedom of government to determine what information, if any, it will deign to make available. I think that's hit the nail on the head. Right, have we got any more business to cover, boys? Anything else?
There was something I just saw on the Manx.
Oh,
just give me one second.
One thing I'd like to encourage people to do is Sunday. That was 2 days ago. Was the annual Manx National Anthem Day. It is the anniversary of when the Manx National Anthem was first played, first performed back in 1907. And for those of you who are interested in doing a little bit of shopping locally, Manx Inspirations, hopefully that doesn't get too much glare here, does a beautiful little A4 little framed poster with the words of the national anthem. So something this lockdown might be something to teach your kids about the words. Be a great opportunity to share a bit of heritage and with the children.
And if you're doing it properly, obviously do it in Manx Gaelic as well.
Yes, I have enough difficulty with one verse in English, let alone multiple verses in Manx.
Just one thing I wanted to pick up on there was Manx Telecom email appears to have been down most of the day as well. I think it is still down. I mean, I still have a Manx.net account, and it's still throwing up an error at my end. Just some sort of chatter there on social media. It's an appalling service, and I think these are one of the fundamental things about the front end of the island in terms of the shop window and so on. If people are looking at relocating to the island, whether for business or whether for retirement or whatever, broadband is one of those real basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it? It's right down there at the bottom. A good stable Wi-Fi signal, and this again isn't doing the place any favours. A friend of mine relocated a tech business to the island and then waited literally months to get his super fast broadband in. His offices were right next to the exchange, and he was literally running this entire office and developing a really important world-class product from a 4G signal for his entire office. These are things that just shouldn't happen. It's bad PR. And Manx Telecom do appear to have let the side down a little bit there, and I hope that it gets recovered quickly and comes back bigger and stronger this time.
The shop window, I think it's boarded up at the moment on that front, because what is it? Jersey are number 2, aren't they, in the world rankings? And we always compare ourselves with Jersey when we're doing slightly better than them at something, but not when it comes to the internet stakes. I've got another message that's come up on the screen, and it's a little bit controversial. It goes back to a few weeks ago and my experience, okay? It's from Oliver. He says, do you think it was right of Skeetnet to give Mr. Heading a platform to voice his views? I've thought long and hard about this. And Mr. Heading isn't alone. He's an activist against the subject of vaccines, really.
Everything.
Everything.
Yeah, but also September 11, he reckons, was an inside job. So there's a whole bunch of crazy conspiracy theories.
Yeah, and I thought at the time, it was fair to engage with him. He's appeared on Manx Radio, and I think he's appearing all over the island at the moment, I think, on a means to try and spread his message about the vaccine and its effectiveness and so forth. And I don't regret, having a conversation with him, because I did learn a lot from that. And it's just one of those things that happened. My YouTube account, the administrators got in touch with me and said, this video is getting pulled, so I don't know how that happened. It was quite a surprise.
So what, YouTube, the company, pulled it off you?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Wow. Must have been complaints about it in terms of its content. I mean, the problem is that there's COVID denial is fine, or COVID vaccine denial is fine if you've got some solid scientific evidence to back up your case. That seems to be lacking. There's no doubt about it. The weight of evidence is in favour of vaccination, and there's new data trials coming out all the time which is showing the efficacy of the vaccine. So if you've got some groundbreaking solid research that shows that it doesn't work fine, but people are bloody confused enough as well without, sort of some tin foil hat theories being bandied about. And I suppose the thing is, that's one of the things about journalism, either, on a professional, semi-professional or amateur basis. You don't really know what you're getting until you get the person in front of you. I mean, thank God he didn't start to touch on whether, certain issues between 1941 and 1945 were a conspiracy job, and you don't know how it's going to go until you actually get them in front of you. I suppose the thing is that it's a learning experience there, and maybe in retrospect, if that's what was faced with you, Jed, and based on the response of YouTube, it's something that had it happened again, you might have taken it down yourself on that basis. You don't know, but these people, there's a freedom of speech sort of issue with it. Yes, they deserve to have their views listened to, but I really think it's one of those things where they need challenging in terms of, come on, let's see your raw hard data, because otherwise you're just talking out your hat.
I think Derek makes a good point there, and there's a whole bunch of really carefully delineated issues here. And one of these things is, on these different issues, people can have different views. And so, first of all, on the substance of what Courtney Adam Lawrence thinks, is that his fundamental view is that germ theory is wrong. His fundamental theory is that viruses do not transmit via, illness rather, does not transmit via viruses or bacteria, but rather some sort of amorphous, holistic thing, right? And so his explanation was widely held in Europe up until the 19th century. And so for the last 200 and a bit years, we in the West and in this European civilization know that that idea is wrong. It's nonsense. In India, they've known it's nonsense for about 1,000 years. And some of the ideas from the Bible, from the time of Moses, talks about people being infected and transmitting disease to other people. And so that idea of germ theory is been known to humans for a long time. And when he, his nonsense, it's not consistent with the facts. I remember as a child, I got chicken pox for 2 weeks, and then my brother got chicken pox for 2 weeks, and you could see the disease literally transmitted by germs from one to the other in the family. And so I think Courtney. Secondly, I think it is wrong for an American corporation like YouTube, like Google, to make determinations about what is allowed to be broadcast and heard here in the Isle of Man. In that, I think Courtney Adam Lawrence is wrong, but I have real problems with these modern gatekeepers making determinations about the ideas that you and our listeners are able to hear. Because I think the antidote for Courtney Adam Lawrence's views is not to suppress them, but to prove they're wrong. And to, if the audience doesn't realise that he's talking crap, that is ignorant of the last 220 years of Western scientific progress, then the antidote has got to be, well, we've got to talk to the population about that. We've got to talk about how we learned that cholera, it was a man in London discovered cholera was being in a community because he got out a map and he showed on the map where all the people were infected and they were all drinking from the same well, which proved that germ theory was real and that Courtney Adam Lawrence was wrong. You in your own family, Jed, with the coronavirus, your child got the coronavirus first. And then we saw it quite literally on video here a year ago almost. We saw it rip through your family. And so the idea that it's not transmitted from person to person, well, that's an idiotic idea, right? He's wrong. And the antidote for the Courtney Adam Lawrence is for us to prove he's wrong, not for the American corporation to say, no, you're not allowed to hear what Courtney says.
I suppose the only way they can do that is sort of restrict it to Isle of Man IP addresses, isn't it? And then it festers within that particular postcode, as it were. I think that's the problem with YouTube, is that it is a global platform, and there will be another Courtney somewhere in Wyoming or something like that, and they do tend, they can gather a collective head of steam if we're not careful, and it can undermine the efforts of much bigger governments than the Isle of Man. But I get exactly what you're saying. Are they becoming the police of the internet? And there is a suggestion that we should expect them to do that and remove harmful, offensive, and dangerous content without the intervention of the state. But it does raise some very interesting ethical questions with regard to what we do and don't view, and we'll see Chinese state suppression of certain stuff on the internet. Are these corporations acting in the same way?
It was certainly a time to reflect. Now, we've had quite a few contributions about this. I'll just trawl through the responses here. So, Kevin, freedom of speech, whether you agree or not, is still healthy to hear a different opinion. Uncle Rich, the man in line has more opinionated people. Skeetnet, no case to answer. And that's true. Some of the stuff you hear on there, it makes you step back a little. And Christian, he says, well, where do you actually draw the line, with freedom of speech? So there's another one just come in.
Sure. Well, let me answer the question about where. Let me answer the question of where you draw the line. Is that we in the Western world, in the UK and in the Isle of Man and in Australia and the US and Canada, all have limits to free speech that are around harassment, around intimidation, about incitement to threats, and where that speech is part of a crime. So, for example, you have a freedom of speech, but you can't literally defraud someone. So if you that still remains a crime. Similarly, you can't defame someone, and courts are very practiced at hearing that. And so we have a bunch of institutions in our society which are very experienced over about 800 years or so in finding out where that line is. And so for an American corporation to come in and make arbitrary decisions that, as far as we can tell, are not appealable or subject to review is very concerning, because this question of where the boundary is hard to determine. And so to simply outsource it to some multinational corporation rips away one of the key strengths of our Western liberal democratic tradition.
Picking up again, Kevin says it's to do with the funding that has been put into GCHQ and USA organisations to promote the COVID vaccines. They don't want anyone promoting anti-vaccinations as they're trying to achieve immunity. But I think having information that disrupts the credibility of the vaccine isn't going to do the population any good in many people's views. But you look at what's happening in the news where these vaccines have been created, and then there are new variants coming out, and it's almost like a daily thing, isn't it? There's one from New York that's emerged in the last few days. So then you think, well, hang on, if I get jabbed, I'm going to have another jab next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, and it's quite a worrying issue for anyone who's privy to this information that can be found online on the internet, and it just gives that bit of doubt, doesn't it? There's so many stories. I mean, was it Italy that just halted AstraZeneca just for a few days? So it's
sure,
far,
yeah, a number
it's
of
far
countries.
reaching.
A number of countries in Europe did halt it, but that's because they're based on they're idiots. And so there is, again, different views that different people can hold at different stages of this in a reasonable way. And so for an individual, whether or not they take the vaccine is up to them. They have to make their own cost-benefit analysis, and they can make their own determination. But when these bumbling bureaucratic boobs in the government leadership of Italy or France make these decisions, their rationale is very different. And the sad situation is, as a result of those decisions of the Italians and the German and the French and the some of the other Scandinavian nations, people died. And so when you've got to recognise that the question here is not between do I take the vaccine or nothing. The question is, do I have the vaccine or do I have the risk of the virus? And on an individual level, you can make that decision. What you choose, you control your own body. It's up to you. But on behalf of the population, the ministers who say we'd rather let the virus spread a little bit longer, they are unreservedly, they are bloody idiots. They are stupid, and if not criminal, in that those decisions will lead to people dying. And we live in an unfortunate society whereby the people who have sins of omission are treated differently to the sins of commission. In that failing to save a life, on one level, actively kill them, and there are interesting ethical debates that you can have around that issue. But these Italian clowns who stop people getting vaccinated, as a result of that, more people will die.
Well, I mean, they operate under the same Human Rights Act as the United Kingdom, and the state has a positive obligation to protect life under Article 2. And it does seem that with the management of some of the strategies within certain European governments, there is a degree of acceptable battlefield casualties that haven't been seen since the Third Battle of Ypres. It's a bizarre approach. I think now we're reaching a tipping point where there is a degree of risk control where you can, certainly in the UK, where hang on, we've got 17 odd million jabs in people now. Let's just start to ease springs a little bit, and they're not rushing it, but we're starting to see that there's a confidence with regard to early April for changes and more fluidity in the population. But certainly they've to Europe, haven't they, for this coming 12 months? There's economies on their arse. Spain is on its backside. It needs the tourism input. It's just not going to get it. There's a £5,000 fine if you leave on holiday now in the British Isles. Leave the British Isles to go on holiday. I mean, I can live with that thing. The only thing that really sort of troubles me and my missus is the fact that our son is 6,000 miles away in Japan, and God knows when we'll actually next physically see him, and that's hard. And it's the actions of some other countries that are making this that date that we do get to see him again further and further away, and it's selfish and unfair, as well as being borderline criminal, as you say, Michael.
What a legacy. We've got some more comments just appearing on, and it's a good valid one from Dale. And he's referring to Courtney. He has lots of other places to talk about his crackpot theories without you giving him another one. Okay, fair point on that. And from Chris, Courtney has become an Olympic level expert at bad data and supports other bad data. He thinks he will win debates because nobody has time to verify one thing he says to or next in real time. So it's some good contributions there. I think we'll just cut that subject. Maybe we could have a special late night edition on conspiracy theories. So, did the high-ranking political member's daughter have a birthday party on the flip-flop weekend? We will never know. But anyway, we'll just move on from that one. Kevin says, to add, that's an interesting one, this. To add that a military unit was formed within cyber security section of the UK military to take down any anti-vax adverts. This was well published by UK government last year, so I'm going to get tear gas and the stormtroopers kicking the door down. And
a drone strike for an orbiting predator drone with a small puff of smoke with a surgical strike above your house.
Oh, another one here, very quickly, because we're coming to the end. Have you guys seen what the Dutch government have done with opening up events? As long as you have a COVID test, you can attend. No restriction in place. What do you think? So I'd imagine you come in with a pass or some certificate. Is that the perception?
A smoke? I don't know. I mean, crikey! I mean, Amsterdam was really the craziest place I've ever been. It's they have a very laid back attitude to everything, the Dutch, don't they? But I mean, crikey! In terms of strategists and world powers as they were, they got an awful lot right over the years. Maybe they're right with this one. I don't know. I don't know what their figures are, but certainly a more pragmatic bunch you're unlikely to meet than the Dutch, that's for sure.
Michael, quick one on that.
It's difficult to comment on any individual measure without looking at it in terms of a part of a broader strategy. And so the government here in the Isle of Man, their strategy is, and their number one objective of their exit plan is that there be no local restrictions. I think that's a bad objective because we've spoken on the show here before about parents who have not seen their children across as close as Cumbria. There was one woman we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, Mel Jane Carr. Her daughter will be 16 come September. She's not seen her daughter since the daughter was 14, right? And so for us to not wear masks or not do widespread local testing or to not take restrictions seems out of kilter with the benefit. I don't particularly enjoy wearing a mask when I'm out and about, but it's a whole lot better than lockdown. Let me give you the hot tip. And these sort of measures are probably going to be in some part of mitigating the spread of the disease. A mask is not something I enjoy wearing, but the cost of wearing it is literally trivial. In the same way, I don't particularly enjoy wearing socks and shoes around the house or even when I was at the office. But you do that out of because the benefit is slightly better than the alternative. And so in that sense, we need to recognise that there are trade-offs here. There are costs and there are benefits, and we need to have a real conversation about these things and recognise that when the government says that we don't want to have any of these mitigation measures, that prevents Mel Jane Carr from seeing her daughter. That prevents working class people here in the Isle of Man who work with their hands, who work in person and can't work remotely for 2 weeks. It prevents them from seeing their family across in the UK. And that's what this our community really needs to come to grapple with. That they're trade-off. There's no silver bullet. Even something like a vaccine, there is a trade-off. You have the cost of perhaps feeling unwell for a day or two, perhaps having a sore arm, or perhaps any of the other reported side effects. But that trade-off comes with the benefit, well, you're going to have a lower risk of getting the COVID virus, which also has a bunch of different symptoms and different consequences. And so we've got to talk in the context of trade-offs and benefits of costs that mitigate different things. And it's difficult to answer, that person's question about this specific measure in Holland, in the Netherlands, because that comes as part of those costs and trade-offs. And we need to have this debate as a community rather than just having the chief minister and his offsiders come down like Moses coming down from the mountain with his new pronouncements etched in stone. There needs to be a discussion. There needs to be a debate, because it's not at all obvious that the moral decisions that the chief minister makes are right for everyone.
Well, it's true that the legacies aren't just pure physical ones, the lost connections. And I just picked up on what you said, Derek, about not seeing your son for so long, and you're not alone. I think everyone right across the community now is just starting to get a little bit upset, fractious. The strain is beginning to take its toll, I'm sure, and the sooner we get the population moving again and travel off the island, it can't come quick enough, because I think the damage is already done.
And don't get me wrong, we still haven't seen Becky. She lives in London, and we're hoping to see her. If restrictions are lifted over the Easter weekend, that will be well over a year since we last saw her. I think she was last on Ireland January. In fact, no, we were down in London January 2020. So it's over a year since we've seen her. We're on the same landmass. So this is desperate, and that extra stretch of water that is keeping people apart on the island, it really does need some real soul searching by government to think about. Listen, is there a better way of doing this? And I still commend to them, just align yourself with England on this one now. We're all in it together, and let's get things moving again, and a bit more free movement. And certainly our vaccination numbers are up there. You're getting there. The very vulnerable can still be shielded if necessary. Let's just get on with this now.
Michael?
Yeah, look, just as I'm mindful of the saying that the night is darkest before the dawn. And I know that a lot of people right across the Isle of Man are doing it tough. There are a lot of people who are lonely. I feel your pain, and I've been awfully lonely some of these weeks. But we are mere months away from what will be a wonderful reconnection and a wonderful rejuvenation. And I look forward to the next, might be 6 months, it might be 3 months, it might be 9 months, but we're going to see a wave of family reunions. We're going to see people putting on social media, grandmother meeting the 1.5-year-old child for the first time. We're going to see those first hugs of the mother and the daughter, the father and the son again. And I'm excited for that. And I think we've got to recognise that although the night is dark right now, dawn is coming. Those rejuvenations, those reunions are coming. We were not long to go now. So let us get this vaccination thing. Let us get it right out. Let's move forward. We're almost there, boys and girls.
There is hope.
Good word.
and we've just got to hang in there. And just to round off the evening's proceedings, I've got a message, and it's from Charles Price, and he's obviously privy to information that we don't have. And he reflects on the Chief Minister, what he was doing up Stony Mountain with his hammer and chisel the other day. It all makes sense now. So, on that note, the stone tablets were delivered, and we'll call it a day. We'll call it an evening. Thank you, boys. We'll catch up again.